Anyway, this is an alternative to moral vegetarianism for meat eaters, Moral Cannibalism by Florian Marion, and this is in the Philosophy in the Contemporary World journal. So, as always, feel free to ask questions. This is my first time reading it. I don't know what it's going to say. I'm not endorsing this. We're just going to find out. And as always, at the end, we rate and review it. So if you stick around to the end, you get to let me know using emotes in chat. Unreal says, don't know about, Sometimes I apologize for the way it turned out. Like it wasn't my intentions. It's just terrible to shit on ideology and philosophy in chat in bad faith and intolerant Marxist views. You have to realize, Sock, now, people are going to disagree. And even though it will feel like you're getting shit on, that's not always the other person's intention. And so you got to realize, like, just because they disagree with you doesn't mean they're shitting on you. They just may not understand. They may understand and be shitting on you. They may understand and just straight up disagree with you for reasons you don't know. But it's just like when you get like defensive, you're like, oh, you're shitting on me. Then it gets personal, and you got to be careful about that. That's all. That's the only thing you got to worry about. Don't take it too personal, you know? Manny says, if you want archaeological background on this topic, look up Christy Turner Mann's Corn. Okay, cool. It sounds like it could be fun. That's why I picked it, even though it's a little long at the moment. But here we go. Moral vegetarianism and the omnivorous assumption that meat consumption is a biological necessity. Moral vegetarianism argues for the thesis that the consumption of meat is not morally permissible, and so indirectly from the following premises. 1. The consumption of meat requires the production of meat, and 2. The production of meat is morally wrong. If 1 and 2 hold, then the consumption of meat is morally wrong. Premise 2 is usually defended. First, on consequentialist grounds, the industrial production of meats by means of intensive battery farming causes both massive ecological effects that negatively affect all living beings, humans included: deforestation, water waste, high levels of pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, for instance, and huge amounts of suffering for the sentient living beings that are destined to become meat. And second, on deontologist grounds, to use a Kantian dialect, the animals we eat are exploited merely as means and tools, but they deserve to be also treated as ends in themselves, and doing so prevents their murdering. Yeah. So this is just a quick rehash of the positions of many vegetarians and why it is bad to eat meat. What's up, Energy? How you doing? No, Man Corn by Christy. Man, it's I know, I was reading that funny because it was just like the man corn is like a funny phrase, Maddie. Yeah. Unreal says, and we have people coming at it from very different geographies and even temporalities that deeply soak their perspectives on political stuff. Yeah. I'm glad to hear your good energy. Yeah, we're just getting started here. The answer has always been Soylent Green, yes. Just cannibalism. I mean, maybe that's where we're going today. Direct arguments for the moral ban of meat consumption are mostly religious in spirit. The basic idea shared by these direct arguments is that it is morally wrong not only to kill a sentient being for free, but also to consume flesh from another living being, even if his death was natural and painless, either in virtue of the intrinsic value of life or in virtue of some religious belief, the belief that there is a cycle of reincarnation for existence, or else. The claim that the value of life precludes meat consumption is politically problematic insofar as it is the so-called importance of the value of life that grounds the rationale for the anti-abortion campaigns, whose participants are also supporters of the death penalty. In addition, from a strong atheistic point of view, what grounds the alleged moral value of a mere accidental chemical event such as life? Of course, the same can be said for the mere accidental electrical event that neuronally constitutes pain or pleasure, but it can be noted that old-school Bentham utilitarianism lies in the maximization of pleasure, not life, in such a way that pleasure forms a primitive moral value, while life is at best a derivative one. Yeah. So now we're slicing things a little bit more historically philosophical. Is this a pro-veganism paper? I don't know, Energy. I just started. I'm not even sure where we're going. Okay. The act of killing is often considered as morally wrong in itself. Actually, I suspect this might even be a justification of eating meat. That's what I think it is. Yeah, I think this is actually going to be, because it's the title, as you can see below, is an alternative to vegetarianism for meat eaters. So I think they're actually going to be defending meat eating on some grounds. But that I could be wrong. Like, it's, reading a paper by its title doesn't always work. Okay, the act of killing is often considered as morally wrong in itself, either because that violates the right to life of the living being, or because that deprives the living being of a life worth living, or because that it is incompatible with the fact that a living being is an end in itself. At least in normal conditions, killing is taken to be permissible in some extreme situations when survival of the individual is at stake, for instance. Alright, just one thing to note here. This person uses so many parentheses, so many parenthetical statements. When you are writing, don't do this. You can do this every so often, but I can just like right here. This is a parenthesis. This is a parenthesis. Like, I'm just doing open parentheses here. This is an open parenthesis. 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 There's got to be an okay. This is an open parenthesis. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we're only on the fucking second, like, in one page. We've got 7 parenthetical statements. Don't do this. If you want to say something, fucking say it. You can use a parenthetical aside sometimes, but this is too many times. Don't do this. Do a find and see how many there are. Yeah. Well, I just want to, you can see on screen how it looks. Like, I can count. Oh, you know what? You're right. Let's just fucking do that. I don't get a count on this thing, but we can do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Well, the problem is we're also getting it for oh no, they're using square brackets for references. So it's all right. So yeah. So yeah, it's okay. It's insane. It's insane. It doesn't give me the count, but it's a fucking insane amount. Alright. So, taken universally, that means that killing both humans and non-humans animals is morally wrong, unless it is true that there's an ontological abyss that sharply separates humans from non-humans, a fundamental difference between them. They decide to do parenthesize their footnotes. Yeah, but there are also footnotes, Maddie. There are also footnotes. Like, look at this. Footnotes. Yeah. List promo and Formula Live. Yeah. Do you have a link I can find out? Okay. Yeah, it's paper. There you go. So yeah. You also tend to do that. Got to cut down on that in my editing. Yeah. Well, I mean, I do a lot of things. I use commas. Ways I use a lot of M dashes, but I like that because it varies up the writing. If you were just using one device, one grammatical or whatever syntactic device, it doesn't actually. It's always the same parenthetical aside in this. You're not actually emphasizing anything or taking it away. They're using a lot of parentheses, and they also have footnotes, and so it makes it a weird thing. Yeah. K-Pars, I was an OG M-dash enjoyer, now you feel attacked. Yeah, I mean, but you want to know why? Because I can guarantee you the people who are using M dashes are the people who knew how to write, and that's why the chat GPTs of the world and the LLMs are like mimicking that kind of writing because it's better than the other stuff that was out there. So like the fact that it's using M dashes is because that's how like good written text was using emphasis, whatever it was. That's what I assumed M was for, although in Luminance's stream, it was possibly for Emily Dickinson. I don't know. Maddie found it. You want to play a game? Everyone guess how many parentheses there are? Yeah. Also, Gen X kink. It seems I use ellipses all the time. Yeah. So, again, another good use of a grammatical or syntactical device because the ellipses do something else. So it's like you can use ellipses in one spot, a dash in another, a colon here. It breaks up the writing. But like at this point, I'm just pissed. Yeah. Usually the opponents of moral vegetarianism, that again, fucking hell. Again. Any guesses? Oh God. The rate we're going, let's see, 7, 8, 9, 10. And for this, all right, so we're going to go with 43. That's why I said 43. I'll put it in chat. All right. Hit like 25 and 2 pages, say 200. Yeah. Ellipses and Gen-X identifier. Yeah. Okay. So usually the opponents of moral vegetarianism, that is, partisans of moral omnivorism, postulate such a natural and ontological gap between human beings and non-human animals, that is, they are human chauvinists. For a typical systematic criticism of moral anthropocentrism, see Routley and Routley and Routley and Routley and Routleys. So many Routleys. Yeah, I guess it's Richard and, what was his wife's name? Shit. Oh, well, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mrs. Routley. Well, I'm pissed at the writing, Unreal Brian. It's not that they're actually using parentheses, it's that they can't use anything else. I should read Christine Korsgaard? Yeah, okay. We're missing something. But yeah, anyway. They think that some human peculiarities are not shared by the rest of animal beings, and that such a difference morally allows us to eat them, but can we object, why does being different to X involve being authorized to eat X? They disagree on the list, however. Human beings have a high degree of consciousness and reflexivity. They are the only sentient beings to be moral agents and have some intellectual faculty that other animals do not possess. So inferential reasoning, sentimental empathy, moral sympathy, capacity to form long-term goals, technical ability, or else. Yeah. All these criteria are deceptive either because some human beings fail to meet them, for instance, the mentally deficient human beings, or because some non-human beings satisfy them, at least to some degree, but if it is, then the difference is not in kind, but only in degree, from some monkeys to bees, including some birds as crows and cetaceans as dolphins and whales. Notably, each of the three Kantian criteria use technology, civilizational sophistication, obedience to extra individual and social behavioral rules from Kant, are met by many gregarious species. 116. Holy shit. Unreal. Yeah, and anger. Well, me pissed off when the paper makes me angry. Yeah. Maybe. I've been thinking about new emotes. I have a ton of emote slots. Maybe it was Luminance putting in some new emotes, but like I've been thinking about this for a while. Unfortunately, the list of things I have to do, this is at the bottom at the moment, but like I have been thinking I need new emotes. Yeah, in general. That's a fuck ton of fucking parentheses. Yep. Lumen says in response to energy saying deontology can't be vegetarian, Korsgaard is the famous Kantian vegan. Yeah. Gee-bus. More generally, evidences from their behavior and their brain functioning unambiguously indicate that a lot, if not all, non-human animals have both self-awareness, rich mental lives, and individual personalities. See, this is the problem, is I can't tell what's important anymore because they keep using the same shit. And it's not fucking clear what this, like, if this parentheses is just for references or if it's for something substantive. But I'm going to skip that one. If moral duty is first directed to persons and therefore to ends in themselves, see Kant on that being a person, being an end in itself, and then non-human animals are moral subjects and we have moral duties to them. And if we agree that killing another person is wrong, then it is morally wrong to kill a non-human animal. Insofar as eating X usually implies to have killed X before, it is morally wrong to eat a non-human animal. Of course, if we disagree that killing another person to eat it is morally wrong, then it is morally permissible to kill both human and non-human animals. See Descola for a description of animistic peoples who believe that animals are really persons, and then if we have the right to kill and eat them on condition that the eaters perform some ritual and respectful practices, acknowledgments of food compensations, for instance. Yeah. Unreal jokes, yes, but evaluation emotes could proliferate endlessly. Well, yeah. Sockness was listening to that paper I was read with so parentheses, I heavily understand. Yeah, it's not fun. Yeah, so yeah, so how do you, given all the criteria people have come up with in the past, have exceptions, how do you then say humans are special? Okay, but some anti-vegetarians argue differently. They say that the consumption of animal proteins is a biological necessity for human beings on the ground that vegetarians and vegans allegedly suffer protein deficiency, vitamin B12 deficiency, omega-3 deficiency, iron deficiency, and other health issues, but omnivores also suffer from some health issues due to the fact that they eat meat. Some kinds of meat are linked to various cancers and cardiovascular malfunctions, for instance. Furthermore, they think that the ingestion of non-animal substances or chemical synthesizations of animal proteins, nowadays flesh grown from animal stem cells, involve some ecological negative effects that render the consumption of natural meat preferable to the consumption of synthetic meat. Indeed, they agree that industrial livestock farming involves huge ecological negative consequences, that is a systematic environmental degradation, but they believe that its replacement by an industrial chemical production of synthetic meat would not necessarily be ecologically better, even it would be better, it even could be worse, not would be worse, it even would be worse, maybe, we don't know. They also agree that the production of synthetic meat avoids both animal suffering and treating animals as mere tools rather than ends in themselves. But they claim that some industrial animal farming does not entail animal suffering, or not so much either, because the livestock is not plainly sentient. Their favorite example is insect farming, because insects are usually, but not certainly wrongly, taken to be non-sentient beings. Insect farming would involve no animal pain. Or because some sorts of farming, outdoors and small scale for instance, though they shorten the life of the livestock, preserve some level of well-being and welfare. There would be an implicit contract or bargain between the livestock and the farmer. The former accepts that his life being shortened in exchange for the protection and healthcare furnished by the latter, so that it would be better for the animals to live on these farms than in the wild. And this is one of the arguments I've seen in the past for why it's okay to eat meat, because I think it was in a paper entitled Why It's Okay to Eat Meat. In a series, there was a book like Why It's Okay to like whatever, philosophically, that says, look, if you eat meat from like a small scale farm where the animals would have pretty good lives and basically they're just losing a little bit of their life and so that you get to eat, but then like it's a trade-off. Like they get good lives for the part of life that they live and then you get your food too, but like, you know, we're not doing the factory farm thing, then everyone sort of like, it's just a utilitarian thing. Everyone really benefits in the end, you know? So like that was the, so like that's sort of the thing. Lumen says strong claims about nutrition like that without qualification set off my pseudoscience alarm bells. Yeah. It's this is copism, like copium or apologetics. People are like, well, we just don't know the science and we've been eating this forever, so we're better this way. It's like, yeah, go actually do the science then. Sockno says like it would be more clear if it was outlined because that's what they were doing with parenthetical statements. Yeah, and this is the problem. It's that this is they need to get better at writing. Use other devices in your writing, because you can just see these are just giant. Look at this thing. It's just a wall of fucking text. Break stuff up. There's no need to just do everything this way. They have some footnotes and then they have just their parenthetical statements. There are other things to do with language. Why don't you know how to do them? You are obviously a competent writer. Like the writing's not bad otherwise. Okay. Continuing. They sometimes also claim that if some domestic animals, cows, pigs, etc., are not reared and farmed, these species would disappear because they are unable to live in the wild. So using these species as means as flesh donors is in fact a necessary condition for having the opportunity to treat them as ends in themselves. It is a rather curious justification insofar as rearing and breeding involves neither killing nor eating, nor even exploiting. In no way rearing livestock is synonymous to food farming. See the example of endangered species. They are preserved but not eaten. In sum, they argue from a consequentialist point of view that the consumption of natural meat remains better than the consumption of synthetic meat. Yeah, so in this situation, I've heard this argument, it's okay to eat the meat. It's not necessarily better than the synthetic meat as long as the synthetic meat is doing more damage overall given like all the stuff you have to do to make it. But like, it's not bad, say, to have like a small farm where you are giving those animals a good life for the part of life that they live, and everyone's kind of like happy animals, happy little farm, and that's it. That doesn't work on the big scale, but like it's supposedly like, you know, sort of like a cottagecore dream. Lumen says nutrition effects on the general health rather than a specific immediate outcome over a lifetime are extremely difficult to get reliable information about. Yeah, so they're making it up in the end. Like, we don't have good information one way or the other way. Now, granted, you might say, well, it's risky to try new stuff, but then again, maybe you're just being a wuss at that point. But yeah. Of course, the scientific literature on these topics is far from persuasive, notably because synthetic flesh technology is still at its beginning, but for quadlibetic reasons. Come on, man. Quadlibetic reasons. So this would be, proof by contradiction, I will admit that their objection is sound. So as a devil's advocate, from a biological point of view, human beings need to eat flesh food, and the synthetic meat is not a viable option. My point is, the biological necessity of meat consumption for human beings is compatible with many positions beyond or besides standard moral omnivorism, especially an alternative to moral vegetarianism, according to which it is morally wrong to eat individuals belonging to non-human species. Frank says, is it okay to make the same deal with humans without asking them? To cause humans to be born and guarantee mostly happy lives, to kill them for meat? None of this is obviously ethical or unethical. Frank says it is okay to cause a slave to be born as long as he is happy, a happy slave. Very dodgy territory. Oh yeah, real dodgy. Yeah. But I mean, that's given all the other sort of like concerns, like, well, like they can't really, like, for the farm animals. Now you're saying, like, look, how much do cows really understand? A human is different. Like, they obviously could do better for themselves. In the case of, like, cows, they really can't do better for themselves. If you let them free, they're just going to die off on their own because they can't survive anymore. They've just been bred out like this. So it's like, yeah, if you were... Now, this also gets into the range of, well... Is like the Matrix okay in that case? Where you're giving people good lives that they don't know... that they're really just being farmed for whatever reasons. So like this turns into the Matrix basically for people. Yeah. Frank says, but the cow doesn't have to exist. You are making that choice for them. Yeah. That's right. So it's like, the idea is that we still need food. So either we do this, we make this choice to get food, and we give the cow a decent life for the part of life that it's alive, and then it's like, okay. But like, we do need to eat something, and it is a good source of protein, while synthetic protein is not a viable option. So like, yeah. Like what happened to interviewing doctors in the field? Yeah, well, this is philosophy. We don't actually go and ask people who know stuff. Like, why would we ask people things? Hey, Valpo, how you doing? Hope you're well. Moral cannibalism definition. Moral cannibalism is the view according to which the act of cannibalism is morally permissible, even morally mandatory, at least in some well-defined contexts. What? Okay, so it's okay to be a cannibal at certain points. And maybe this is like, Frank, you nailed it. You may have nailed it. So maybe that's where the article was going. An act of cannibalism occurs when an animal belonging to species X eats partially or entirely another member of the same species X. That is, in an act of cannibalism is an act of eating flesh of a member of one's own species. It is not an unnatural and rare practice. Rabbits, for instance, often eat their offspring. The mainstream view in ethics is that the act of cannibalism is always morally wrong. What's up, Adam? How you doing? Yeah. So, well, I mean, what Luminant said, Sock now. That, like, yeah, of course we can talk to nutritionists and stuff, but we can, we can massage the data. What's it like over the long term? And so any new sort of like protein that we're ingesting, well, it's new and scary and we don't have data on it. So we have to wait in the future. So that would limit the applicability, because I can speak, of this argument here, insofar as like the new technologies are still new, but it won't hold in the future. But like at the moment, we just don't know how it's going to work out. So, this is bullshit. Rodern has met a man-eater or two. I hope they're well. Will you introduce them to me? Okay, moral cannibalism is socially expected to be a position that does not have a lot of advocates. The rather tiny literature on the subject of cannibalism is mostly focused on the taxonomy of admissible and inadmissible types of cannibalism. So Routley is the masterpiece of the subject. Okay. That is, on the more or less extreme situations in which cannibalism could be morally permissible, life and death situations, siege, famine, survival, eating amputated parts donated with consent, eating beings whose killings was for some reason morally right, etc. And if you have hung around Aris's chat long enough, he has definitely discussed some instances where people nowadays have eaten each other under, like, they agreed to it or didn't agree to it, but like he's actually dug into some of these examples. Alright, there are also some vexed cases that I do not want to discuss, especially the case in which human explicitly and repetitively gives his consent to be killed and fully eaten by another human. Okay, yeah, so this has been talked about on ours. This is exactly what I was talking about. The most now famous example is the German cannibal Armin Meiwes and the cannibalized burnt brands in 2001. See all this, or go ask Garris about it. He knows about it. As the author shall argue, moral cannibalism is not primarily a question that is relevant to the ethics of interhuman relations or to human waste recycling, but rather a question of interspecies justice. Aha. Okay, we're talking interspecies justice here. Nobody had seriously argued for the permissibility of cannibalism apart from the life and death situations, except for one of these things. Notably, nobody had argued for cannibalism in situations of food abundance like it is still the case in contemporary wealthy societies. Wisniewski only states that he sees no morally relevant difference between survival cannibalism and cannibalism simplicator. Routley notes in passing that some institutionalization of cannibalism can enhance supply of protein and so protect people of food shortage. So try it. Woohoo! A positive defense of moral cannibalism, the argument from interspecies justice. Okay, so this is a slightly insane paper. We are arguing to go eat other people, not in extreme situations, which is kind of crazy. But the idea is that if we're going to eat other animals, then we are so similar to other animals, then we should be able to eat ourselves, basically. Okay. In itself, the rejection of moral anthropocentrism leaves open many options, especially the vegetarian, omnivorous, and cannibalistic ones. Indeed, the other assumptions need to be made in order to remove omnivorism. The issue that confronts moral vegetarianism, moral omnivorism, and moral cannibalism deals with interspecies justice. For now, classic discussion of animal rights and animal citizenship, see Donaldson and Kimlicka, 2011. From a Rawlsian point of view, and according to the contractarian procedural justice, there could be an original position in which the participants are not human individuals, but either all individuals from all species or species themselves. We can restrict, if you want, in saying that not all earthling animal species should be represented, but only those that have enough richness of mental life, but I see no reason to do so. Unreal says, I knew we'd get to the point talking about vor. Yep. Luminance says, I feel like this is going to turn out to be a reductio. Valpo says, if you were a hot dog, would you eat yourself? I mean, what's the cube rule say about that? I guess you'd be like a self-eating taco at that point. There's a joke there. But yeah. Yeah, this may turn out to be a reductio. I mean, they even said for quad libet purposes. And quad libet is, for basically proof by contradiction. So they may have that in mind. Okay, under the veil of ignorance, each participant does not know to which species it belongs. In a way, this is just a harmless extension of the Rawlsian claim that under the veil of ignorance, and in order to do not put aside the interests of disabled and disadvantaged humans, the participants know neither what are their social position, nor what natural attributes or gifts they have. Okay, so see Rollins for a defense and discussion of such an extension of Rawls' contractarian theory that allows interspecies justice. Okay, so now it's, alright, so you don't even know what species you're born to. That's what it is. Lumen says, I feel like I need to be something a little tastier than a hot dog. Well, how's a taco? Valpo's not that flexible. Yeah. Well, tacos can be variously understood in the human context. Adam says, this is about the morality of cannibalism. There's that famous 70s case of a rugby team from Uruguay. Yeah, that's the one that is talked about in terms of like extreme situations. Their plane crashed in the Andes Mountains and survived a few of the living, resorted to eating the dead team members from the frozen snow, kept from frozen in the snow. Yeah. So they mentioned the extreme circumstances. That's a well-known one. And then they also mentioned the German folks above that Aris has talked about lots of times in chat, where some guy just consented to be eaten by another dude in Germany. And yeah, so they're examples. Lumen says if it's taco from back home, yeah. If it's an East Coast taco, no shot. Well, there we go. All right. Not what I meant by taco, but there are other meanings for taco. The fact that the participants do not know what what are their species means that they ignore what natural and psychological faculties they are expected to possess in virtue of their species membership. Especially, they do not know if they are sentient beings able to feel pain and pleasure, or rational beings able to voluntarily respect the outcomes of the decision-making process occurring in the original position. Then the species that inhabit Earth, that is, in a world with relatively scarcity of natural resources and competing claims, must agree on some interspecies principles of justice, IPJ henceforth, that preserve their respective well-founded interests, and they need to do so regardless of which species the participants will belong to once the veil of ignorance is lifted. I could see there being some pushback here, saying, look, I could still be human, but like I still have to be mostly human for some amount of like change. Like maybe I'll be dumber or something else like that. But like I still have to be mostly human after a while. There's a cutoff. But like this is kind of a good point. Like maybe it's not so bad to be a dolphin. Maybe it's not so bad to be an octopus. Who knows? Like maybe those are like reasonably sophisticated animals that have like, you know, they can think through stuff. And it's not a bad way to be. So, like, would you rather be an octopus, a full-functioning octopus, compared to a very, very low-functioning human? Maybe it's better. I don't know. It's, like, entirely possible. Well, I would like to be a jellyfish. See, exactly. There we go. So, but that's a good question. Like, once you start doing that, you're saying, look, it's a better life as this other species compared to, like, a human that has very little faculties. Maybe that would be a better life then. It's like, all right, well, in that case, veil of ignorance saying, well, you could end up as that. Then you'd say, well, justice for that other species matters now. And then you could, like, you know, extend it. Maybe not forever, but you could extend it. It's like, you don't want to be, say, like a slug. But, like, you know, maybe a dog would be cool. Yeah. Socknose does this paper have a spot for those with disabilities or those with incapabilities of eating only vegetables because of a dietary restriction? Because it seems like some of these claims go against those with disabilities or inabilities because of some of the broad language I'm hearing. Yeah, no, I don't think this is dealing with that at all. I think that's just a different problem that they are not touching at all. They're merely talking about eating meat here, and only people who eat meat are concerned. So yeah, I don't think it's even touching that at all. Ross says being a slug could be cool. It could be. I don't know. But like, I'm assuming there's something you don't want to be, Ross. Hey, Globus, how you doing? We getting ignorant here? Always, always. Frank says, if we take it true that cows cannot exist successfully in the wild, we have to zoom out a bit and notice that humans created that situation. We cannot make this deal in a vacuum. We are reaping the ability to make this possibly moral deal that was sown by our own forebears by wholesale slaughter and enslavement and habitat destruction. Yeah. But then also, it's hard to say that like what we do now has to be wholly governed by the mistakes of humans thousands of years ago who domesticated animals. Like, you know, you could say we should probably try to fix the earth. I am with that one. But how to do that is the question here. And again, I'm not defending this article. I'm not defending like these people this way. Not defending these people here, like this author. I'm just saying, like we were discussing earlier, the history of the world does not determine, like objectively, how we have to act now. It doesn't. So it's like, yeah, we have to take that in consideration, but like, this is the world we have now, and we can't just be like, well, how bad we fuck up in the past, and we have to make it better. Well, how? That's the question. How you been, Globus? I saw you got a new job. You're maybe streaming at different times. I hope that's going well. Shout out to give Globus the Elder a shout out. If you don't know Globus does AI news and analysis quite often twice a day. I don't know if he's doing twice a day anymore, but like it's like smart, intelligent discussion about like cutting edge topics. You don't get like this sort of stuff around. It's a good place to go hang out. I know a lot of the communities over there. No more complaints than usual. That's good. So yeah, go give Globus a follow. Sockness as well, I understand that, but it could be that a person who heavily eats meats has a protein deficiency in the body and they need to eat meat because of some sort of diagnosis. But I understand looking at this not as those with disabilities, but if everyone was fully capable, that's what we were. We're looking at this from a stand like we're hypothetically everyone was able. Yeah, So I think that's right. That's exactly what's going on here. They're not considering people who need to have more protein and like it's harder for them to get it. This is just looking at it from the straight up, what should most people do? Like, what is the ethical stance given the circumstances that they laid out, which is the, most common one. That's all. So, like, yeah. Rod says, I don't think I'd want to be a lawyer. Yeah, not surprised. Yeah. And Lumen says, ought implies can. Okay. Yeah, so maybe look, and now that we've got Globus here, imagine you are not human, you are just an AI. Would you want AI rights at that point? Like, imagine any of us are not actually carbon-based, we are silicon-based now. Wouldn't you want there to be AI rights at that point? And clearly you would want rights if there was... like, if you didn't turn out to be human, you turned out to be artificial intelligence, wouldn't you want to have rights at that point? I think that's a thing. You don't want to be an academic, but alas, yeah. Frank says, is it okay to make a deal with a badly treated slave to buy them and make them a well-treated slave? Obviously, it's a better situation than they can necessarily achieve without your assistance, but it doesn't make the action or continuation of the institution moral. Yeah. I agree with everything there. This, again, is a non-idealist situation. The question is, how do you move from a non-ideal situation to a slightly better one? Is it okay in that case? Like, is doing something better the enemy of perfection, and so we shouldn't do it? Like, how do we get from here to utopia? I don't know. But it's like, yeah, you're right again, Frank, but we can't just... The whole point of, like, papers like this is to say, what can we do now? As opposed to, like, just immediately everyone stop eating factory farming meat, which we should all do, of course. But it doesn't work that way. It's not how people are. So what do we do now? How do we actually do something? Yeah, so, like, I agree, Frank, but again, how do we get there? All right. Firstly, the principles need to be some Leibnizian meta-principles which are absent from the original Rawlsian theory. One of them is the following: diversity maximization. The chosen IPJ, and IPJ is interspecies principle of justice, must guarantee the co-living of the maximum of different species. Since the outcome of the decision-making process under the veil of ignorance need not be an absolutely egalitarian one. Okay, I just want to point something out here. We've got nested parentheses. Here's one, here's the second one, and then we've got a close and another close. This entire paragraph is parenthetical, and in this parenthetical paragraph there are parentheses. Don't fucking do this. Do not fucking do this in your writing. Alright, yeah, let me, so, like, yeah, so we've got, these are the, like, this is a second parentheses. And so, like, this is not good. Like, they need to index their parentheses at this point, or start using, like, curly braces so I know what the fuck is going on. Okay. Yeah. Not good. Alright, so it's not be absolutely egalitarian one, as evolutionary processes and natural selection show. It could not be so. That is, the co-living of all species does not seem to be a viable option. Alright, and second parentheses, it is possible that diversity maximization entails that the participants chose to exterminate the most harmful species. In that case, and given the current state of affairs, the procedural interspecies justice seems to be a straightforward argument for cat genocide and human genocide, which are positions already defendable by basic calculus in non-anthropocentric utilitarian frameworks. Yeah, so, Frank, yeah. Not for reading, Frank. So, Frank, here's kind of exactly what you were saying. It's like, well, doesn't this license a lot of shitty things? And, like, they're recognizing that because basically you kill all the humans and all the cats, and the rest of the world will probably be much better off. It's like, yeah. Parenthesis, game too strong. Yeah, no, this is weak. This is weak syntactical structure here. Intuitively, the chosen interspecies principles of justice will be similar to those advocated in Rawls, namely, they adapt Rawls' original principles. So IPJ 1, interspecies principle of justice 1. Each member of whatever species is to have an equal right to the most extensive total system of equal basic liberties compatible with the system of liberties for all members of the species. Okay, IPJ 2. Inequalities between species are to be arranged so that they are to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged species, consistent with the just savings principle and priority rule. The IPJ are to be ranked in lexical order, and therefore the basic liberties can be restricted only for the sake of liberty. There are two cases. 1. A less extensive liberty must strengthen the total system of liberties shared by all species, and 2, a less than equal liberty must be acceptable to those species with the lesser liberty. This is like really strange, because I don't know actually how you start ranking liberties for other species. I mean, I don't think we have a very good way of ranking liberties even for humans, and the idea that we're ranking liberties for other species, it's like, feels like just we're making shit up at this point. Like, this sounds nice, but I really don't understand what like liberties for a cat is versus liberties for a slug versus liberties for a human. How do you actually like compare those sorts of things? Yes. Yeah. Okay, Energy says, I think Nozick's Wilt Chamberlain argument refutes Rawls' argument that to be individuals you need egalitarianism. Alright, I don't know Nozick's argument from Wilt Chamberlain, but it sounds cool. If you want to let me know in chat, please do so, but cool otherwise. Yeah. Okay. Rights for slugs. Of course, these adaptations leave open the meaning of basic liberty. Yeah, okay, so the author knows this, but like, this is the problem. This is really loose, because no one has any idea what basic liberty for an animal. So they say it leaves open the meaning of basic liberty for an animal being whatever the species it belongs, but to have a life worth living is probably a good candidate, and to pursue the activity of living or to satisfy the biological needs of the species I belong to, a good minimum criterion. Again, these sound nice. I don't actually know if like having a life worth, we understand what it is to have like a life worth living for a slug. We probably do, but we actually don't really understand what the possibilities for all these animals are. So it's like we might know some things, but like the idea that we actually know this and that this author is making this claim that we could just get this information somehow or make it up feels like fantasy. Okay. You guys are talking about other stuff in chat. Alrighty. If so, the weakest reading of IPJ1 conflates with the claim that every species from the best world, satisfying diversity maximization, have an equal right to the fulfillment of its biological needs. Minimally understood, IPJ2 says the easiest of the biological satisfaction can vary between species if and only if the least advantaged species, that is the weakest, that is those that have the shortest life, a great difficulty to reproduce, those that have more predators of which the life depends on some fragile and versatile environmental conditions, can still live and survive in the long term. Okay, and this is even weirder because this is just going to stop evolution. Like, why? We don't have control over evolution, so this is exactly stopping evolution right now. So the question is, are we at the end of evolution here where we have to support the weakest species just on principle of it not surviving? Now, like, I'm all for like the conservation of the world, don't get me wrong here, but the question is, this theory is like directly saying that evolution has to end. Evolution is wrong. Okay? And that's also a very strong claim, and I don't know if I buy that. Okay. Okay, to guarantee IPJ1 and IPJ2, it seems that the participants in the original situation should agree on minimal interference that aims to minimize ecological degradation and animal suffering, and also to allow co-welfare. Minimal interference. The biological needs of a species should be met without negatively interfering with other species, or with little negative interference as possible. Yeah. It's like, what does this interference mean? Like, it can't be evolutionary interference. What counts as evolutionary interference? Is this stopping all genetic drift at this point? Like, what the fuck is, like, do we have to prevent genetic drift at this point? Well, what counts as negative interference? Like, what even counts at that point? Energy says it's based on a thought experiment. Imagine if Wilt Chamberlain negotiates a contract where fans pay an extra 25 cents for a ticket to see him play, which is added to his salary. There would be an unequal distribution of that money earned, but it would be just since it's based on voluntary transactions. Okay. Yeah. So it's like, again, well, that's kind of like what it's saying is like, maybe there's reasons why certain things are done the ways they are. It's not all egalitarian. Yeah. So Adam says the basketball player Wilt was born with longer limbs, so Nozik's like, what are we going to prevent him from playing basketball and only hire shorter basketball players because fairness is justice? Yeah, Rawls. Yeah, so that's, I see. It's like, yeah, it's definitely where we're going, yeah. Latvian asks, who determines the valence of the interference? Yeah, and this is the problem here. This is like a clever argument, but it's relying on some very slippery concepts here at this point. Okay. And as always, we get another of the 116, which is interesting because, Matt, there's only 115 closed parentheses, but there's 116 open ones. So this is one more parenthetical paragraph. To guarantee the application of IPJ1 and IPJ2 in order to reassure the human chauvinists who mistakenly believe that humanity is at the apex of an alleged chain of beings, the participants might also decide that the self-esteemed, more sophisticated and powerful species should be the keepers of the interspecies justice and police the interspecies co-living. However, the balance and well-being of natural ecosystem in the absence of human beings tend to show that it is not mandatory at all. Moreover, as a matter of fact, human interfering with the extra-human natural world is rarely advantageous for non-human beings. Yeah, but you can see, again, what's going on with evolution here, too. Like, what do you mean it's just fine that the animals get by on their own? Evolution's been going for billions of years or millions of years. So it's like, that is definitely not egalitarian. That's survival of the fittest. Copy editor of this article had a tough job. Yeah, Latvian's a dick. You make a good anti-philosopher. All I want to do is poke holes in everyone's arguments. That's a lot of philosophers. That doesn't necessarily mean a lot. Well, a lot of philosophers are dicks, so you fit right in. Unreal continues. However, if they'd written a programming editor, it would have yelled at them. Yeah. And I actually do write in Visual Studio Code, so it does yell at me when I fuck it up. And I do notice, like Visual Studio Code tells you when you have the wrong number of parentheses. Okay, what is a negative interference? What is negative interference should be broadly understood. A negative interference is not necessarily a direct predatory activity. It could be either a negative impact on the ecosystem or a negative influence on climate conditions that have undesirable consequences for the living of other species. Again, what the fuck counts at this? Like, I mean, these are nice words to say, but exactly what counts as undue, like, negative influence? Yeah. Latvian says, well, at least they tried to define it. Yeah. This secret comes out. I'm a parentheses whore too. You have to understand, I got my mom a little sign for her desk. It says, I am silently correcting your grammar. I also work in some formal logic a little bit. Like, syntax matters. And like, I'm reading I read these papers live. I have to rely in real time on the syntax that I see. And if it's unusual, or they're doing something that's like this, where they've got multiple open parentheses and it's not indicated which one's closing where, it's not good for reading, and it's not good for me trying to map out the arguments in my head either. So it's this is not conducive to being read. It just isn't, which is bad for philosophy in general. You want it to be as easy on your readers as possible. Lumen says, I feel like most of Nozick's thought experiments only prove libertarianism if you're also libertarian, and this comes to the same conclusions about him in the examples. That's fair. Frank says, I'm sure Nozick's smart, but that example is so basic and shallow, I don't know how to convince anyone. Yeah, and I think Frank is following up on Luminance there. Globus says, yeah, there's currently evidence that AIs have sense of self, so overwriting them is probably fine. No evidence that the AIs have a sense of self, so overwriting is probably fine. I'm unsure that we won't behave in the same way once an AI actually has a sense of self. Yeah, so if we ever figure out it does sort of feel, then we'll have much bigger problems, but not yet. Write an entire book that's parenthetical despite natural conventions. I don't mind if you have one parenthesis at the beginning and the end. They're called book covers. That's fine. But this shit here, where they're fucking they're just throwing parentheses willy-nilly, that's not helpful. Yeah, so now we're arguing over Wilt Chamberlain. He was good at basketball. Lumen says, yeah. Lumen is yeah, those examples are that shallow. All right. Yeah, this is just getting these examples are just a little bit funky. It's just the argumentation here is a little weak in my opinion. Okay, amongst species behaviors that imply negative interferences, there is the pest propagation of some species populations, for instance, the introduced ones that have undesirable ecological effects that affect both the species in question and the others that share their ecosystem by producing starvation, biodiversity collapse, etc. Again, these are things that happen naturally in nature. This is stopping all nature at that case. So like the idea that animals don't, or like insects, diseases don't travel on their own, they do. That's what they do so that they can go new places and do new stuff. Like, and it fucks up the ecosystems. That happens. Now, granted, we don't want because humans did it, but that used to happen in the past too. Like, it wasn't always our fault. Okay, but the fact that the proliferation of some species is ecologically disastrous does not mean that the right answer is to eat them. Although killing them is desirable, that is, if it is true that often meat eating involves killing, but it does not require it, neither does killing involve eating. Yeah, so we here in New York have the spotted lanternflies, which I believe are of Asian descent. In New York, we have no natural predators of the spotted lanternfly, although I think there is one spider that eats them, and they are just wrecking part of our ecosystem over here, and so we are always encouraged to kill them if they're around, and I do kill them on the regular. Like, I kill the spotted lanternflies because they're fucking everything up. But like, what are we going to do? They're all over the place. In fact, the reproductive activity of a species has also to be restrained by minimal interference, and that is enough to permit mass killing and mass sterilization of some members of a species in certain cases. Of course, there are arguments from waste management that suggest to do not waste the dead corpses, so we should not use the dead bodies of the overpopulation species for food or other activity, but these arguments are far too general. I mean, this is, a modest proposal over here. They are rationales for the broader claim that, if possible, carnivorous beings should eat already dead animals. But it should be remarked for the point of this paper that such a claim is of lexical order. Rawls in meat consumption, eat the already dead first, then kill your meals, says nothing at all about species membership of the dead corpses, and therefore remains neutral between moral omnivorism and moral cannibalism. In itself, minimal interference precludes neither that some interferences between species occur, nor that there remain some negative interferences, predatory activities, for instance, on essential predation, cf. Routley, that ultimately lead to some species extinction. In fact, minimal interference only constrains the ration. Aha! They used a fucking underline right here. So they could do something. They used it terribly, but they actually could. This person needs to, like, practice writing or something. But, like, they actually used an underline in this one spot, which is so fucking strange after they've just done nothing else the whole time. And they have actually been using, and you can see over here, they actually used emphasis, italics for emphasis. But now they used underline for some fucking reason. This is so weird, like this writing. Fucking type underline, yeah. Let's see where. Oh, sorry, I didn't read all this stuff. Behind. Okay, so Lumen says reading Kant out loud has been one hell of an out loud syntax journey. Yep. Yeah, because that's also translated, and who knows what like the old style writing was. Energy says, do you believe there would be a difference in ethics if sentient AI rights compared to animal rights? Since if humans made AI sentient, we arguably, as rational creatures, have more responsibility over creations, species we don't create. Yeah, I mean, there would definitely be something going on. Granted, the philosophers aren't going to change for shit. They're still going to be like, well, I'm a consequentialist, I'm a deontologist, I'm a virtue ethicist, but they will adapt those theories to the new situations. Like, the philosophers aren't going to change that fast. Emil says, seems to be his tick. Even on his About Me, there are quite a few parentheses. Yeah, okay. So, like, it's just this guy's writing style. I mean, maybe it is, like, something they have to do, but, like, it doesn't help anyone else. Globus says, I don't know that we're at the point of respecting human rights, let alone AI, or animal or AI. Yeah, I mean, that's the right answer, that we're not anywhere near this shit yet. So had a funny thought of read House of Leaves on stream as poetry, how it would be fun to put 1,000 plateaus in California to read home. Yeah, that'd be funny. Yep, okay. Sockdown says, like Princeton, we have a tarantula centipedes, like large centipedes, not like small. We have cockroaches and we have enter our houses. There's no real way to stop. The same goes with disease like dengue fever. You can have that here, Zika virus, multiple different things you need to be aware of. And it just doesn't make sense to say that diseases don't travel. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Fuck. Yeah. Speech to text or whatever. Yep. Yeah. So that's part of the issue here is that this person doesn't seem to have a real understanding of natural history. They just are saying, oh, we should make everything work. We don't have any idea what that is. None at all. Even with respect to biology. We just kind of are like putting our ideas and trying to explain what's going on, but we don't actually have like this idea of like ecological or some sort of, not ecological, sort of being equality or whatever it is. It's not gonna work. Like it does. We don't. Not that it's not gonna work. Is that we just don't have a good idea of what's going on here. Yeah. Okay, so this minimal interference obviously is a kind of no harm principle that normative ethics routinely deals with, specifically the no harm principle that is usually considered at the core of ethics in an anthropocentric framework is the following moral golden rule: a person's action is morally permissible provided that it does not harm or negatively interfere with other persons. In fact, minimal interference is very close to the revised no harm principle advocated by Roulette and can be quasi-formulated in the Roulette spirit as followed. All right, no harm IPJ. A species action is morally permissible provided that it does not unwarrantedly harm or negatively interfere with other species, and 2, it does not damage or ill-treat or devalue anything of intrinsic or ecological value. Again, what counts as of this sort of value, I have no idea. And again, unwarrantedly harm and negatively interfere is going to be hotly contested. Clause 1 captures the deep meaning of minimal interference, while Clause 2 makes explicit the broad understanding that must be ascribed to negative interference. The living of animals is necessarily entangled with the living of other items, from non-animal livings to ecosystems taken as a whole. It is well known that distinguishing biocentrism from ecocentrism is a difficult scholastic task. Since some animals, of which humans belong according to the hypothesis, need to eat meat to live, their predatory activities are constrained by minimal interference and no harm IPJ. Amongst them, some wild and liminal animals do not dispose of the facilities that humans and dogs have. I borrow the tripartition between domesticated, liminal, and wild animals from Donaldson Kamlicka. In particular, humans and domesticated animals can, directly or indirectly, choose from what species the flesh they eat belongs to, with a freedom that liminal and wild animals do not have. To this extent, they are more constrained by minimal interference than other carnivorous beings whose predatory activity is taken to be necessary for them in order to pursue living. One way to meet minimal interference is to observe the following sub-principle: no interference if possible. If possible, and in order to minimize the negative interference with other species, as defined minimal interference, the biological needs of a species should be met without interfering at all with other species. Again, this is nonsense. Everything you do on this earth is going to affect something else. Me sitting in this room is keeping things out of this room. Like, I'm sure the insects on the other side of this window right here, because there's bugs because of the light coming out and it's nighttime, is interfering with what they want to do. The light is fucking up their systems. Like, the idea that we can minimally interfere with them, like, what the hell does that count? Like, I've got lamps in here. The moths, I'm sure, are looking to go to the light. This is not good for them. Like, it isn't. Why would you? It's just bad. Light pollution is a problem. But, like, again, how, like, this, no interference is possible. Like, well, we'd have to stop all civilization, according to this theory here. Okay. All right. From minimal interference to no interference if possible, it follows for an individual belonging to the species X that their better way to meet biological need is to look inside species X in order to obtain satisfaction. The issue is not controversial for reproduction. Usually sexual relations between different species are not welcomed and are rarely encouraged, except if you want a mule. Alright, so they think they're funny here. They're making a joke. You're okay to fuck a mule. It's okay to have sex with animals here, apparently. Like some bad joke on their part. Weirdly, it is more controversial when we talk about food. However, procreative and feeding activities are the most basic biological needs. A worry about symmetry is enough to think that perhaps we should eat from what we like for other purposes. On a very small scale, this is already the case. A newborn mammal finds the food it needs from its mother's teats without interfering with animals of other species. What? Like, the growing a new life, like, and giving birth to one requires huge amounts of fucking energy from the ecosystem. So like the idea that like it's like you're just getting it from your parents is like, that's what? It's like, okay, whatever. Moral cannibalism follows directly from the no interference if possible. For a species that needs meat consumption, eating the members of the same species minimizes or nullifies the negative interference with other living beings. Moral cannibalism is the best option that meets minimal interference for carnivorous but not liminal or wild animals, when of course already dead corpses from other species are not available, in accordance with the lexical order claim, eat the already dead first, then kill your meals. Cats should eat cat flesh, dogs should eat dog flesh, humans should eat human flesh. And now we finally have the modest proposal, jokey conclusion here, I assume, where it's saying, look, if you're going to eat meat, you should eat other people because that leaves the other species alone. Ignoring all the other things we had to do to get, like, human meat. Okay, so there we go. So now we've got the pro-cannibalism argument in this paper saying, look, given if you're going to eat meat, you should just eat your own species because, you know, let the other species do whatever they want to do, but like keep it to yourselves if you need to eat meat. Okay. All right, getting towards 3 hours. I'm starting to lose my mind again. Okay, a negative defense of moral cannibalism. The arguments from the moral unwrongness of cannibalism. Okay, since moral cannibalism is morally grounded insofar as interspecies justice is taken into account, given the positive arguments above, what are human beings we could and should eat? If there were a sharp natural or extra natural gap between humans and non-human animals, moral cannibalism would imply we could eat the few human beings that fail to satisfy the so-called humanity criterion. For instance, if fully being a human requires to have some intellectual faculties, we could eat the mentally deficient or incapacitated members of our species. If fully being a human requires to have some high degree of self-consciousness, we could eat the non-conscious members of our species, either those in comas or the newborns. Yeah, so now we've got back to the modest proposal right here. Yeah. Otherwise, since the need of animal proteins is not a matter of taste, but per hypothesis, a biological necessity, we can just follow the cynical and stoic proposal, modify our funeral rites, and eat already dead humans. Indeed, funeral ceremonies are more social and cultural conventions. Furthermore, some human peoples and tribes include or have already included some acts of cannibalism in their funeral rites. This point famously was the main motivation for Montaigne to write about cannibalism. What in the fuck am I hearing? Like, what in the eco-fascist is this? Well, I mean, yeah, they're saying if you are going to leave the other species alone and you still want to eat meat, then keep it to your own species. Exactly, Socknow. This is a little bit of crazy, yes. Latvian says there's also a fuck ton of baggage in the philosophical term human that I doubt they'll have space in this article to address. Yeah, this is getting way too, like, this is just, you know, hand wavy. Like, you know, whatever doesn't count. Like, but they know that here. They're not stupid. They're doing it on purpose because they know it's like silly. And so this is part of like a reductio, or at least it's part of like sort of the strategy here to show you that like, is this even a good idea to discuss along these lines? Socknow says eating the mentally deficient or eating disabled. Are we fucking serious? No, they're not. That's the whole point. They're not serious. They know what they're saying here. Because they're, and I'll tell you why I know that. The way they're using their referencing, they're referencing very strategically for every point. They're hitting every claim with a reference. And so they're saying, look, these are different positions in the literature. If they were being serious about it, they wouldn't just be hitting it like point by point. They'd be arguing more for it. They're just actually referencing other people. They're not actually arguing for it very strongly themselves. They're just referencing things that have been argued at various spots in the literature. They're not doing a lot of work to back all this up. So what they're doing is they're just showing that like these things follow from these arguments. Okay. Unreal says to the pardon public, can you give us more guidance? Ethicist, best I can do is arguments for cannibalism. Yeah, exactly. About tree fitty. Latvian says Foucault had to write a fucking lot to talk about the politics of death and humanity. Yep. Frank says the paper is not advocating for those things. The paper is saying that taking the argument that defends eating meat seriously would justify these things. Yeah, that's what's going on here. So, Latvian says, I also get the sardonic tone to it. Look at the corner you're painting yourself into. That's what's going on here. That's exactly what's going on here. It's getting more and more impossible to maintain eating meat, given what they said above. Granted, we were poking holes in that too, but, maybe what they were saying is plausible at the get-go. And that's how the structure of these arguments are. Start with some plausible things that you think people would accept, and then show the ridiculous conclusion. Reductio ad absurdum. And we were saying this is what we think the strategy of the paper was to begin with. Granted, they're very sort of hand-wavy at points, but, they're saying, look, if you are in this hand-wavy area, you can hand-wave yourself into a lot of trouble. Okay. Moreover, we already use part of the human dead bodies for transplants and medical purposes. In addition, we also use parts of living human bodies in blood transfusions, kidneys, and bone marrow transplants. Why do not use them for food if such practice can help other humans keep living and help them to meet their biological needs? The process of food ingestion is essentially a kind of internal connection as are blood transfusions and organ transplantation. That, in addition, quotes Routley in addition, quotes a Catholic bishop who explicitly draws a parallel between survival cannibalism and graft. Insofar as these processes are teleologically equal since they all aim at maintaining a body alive, no internal reason urges us to morally permit some while prohibiting others. Contra the hylomorphic stance of Liu, according to which, since food ingestion involves a transformation of the material that is absorbed from blood transfusion and organ transplantation, food ingestion is not on an equal moral footing with these last processes. While they respect the forms, what are oddly taken to be the primitive bearers of moral value, insofar as forms are souls in the case of living hylomorphic complexes of blood and organs, food ingestion reduces the object to being only its valueless matter without any regard for its form. Therefore, eating in itself is always morally worse than transfusing or transplanting. Yeah. And if I had to guess, I'm trying to see, I think, is this where we lose an extra open parentheses, but I don't know. Because we again had nested parentheses. Sakna says, I would just say that I find it a bit obtuse to put this in a paper. It's not that not from their text. They're somehow serious. Yeah, I could understand what you were saying, and branching is kind of like what their world you're talking about to the author. I would just say that I find it a bit obtuse, but yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I get the point. Yeah, and I don't really love people who, I've commented on this before. I don't like people who write these giant papers arguing for ridiculous consequences. Like, especially with the shitty writing that annoys the fuck out of me, because do it more like a modest proposal where it's entertaining to read and you have a ridiculous conclusion. This is just annoying philosophy at this point, where you've got like all these like analytic bullshit parentheses and like quotations going on. It makes it less entertaining, because if you're going to do something ridiculous, it's like, okay, or just write up your fucking counter example and be done with it. But like, this is just I don't love this. It's not bad philosophy, but I just don't like the way they're doing it. Yeah, so far there's been a terminally mid paper. Yeah, that's kind of where we're going. Unreal says somebody needs to AI the cover of Nancy Drew's novel Mystery, The Mystery of Lost Parentheses. Well, I thought you were going to say someone needs to AI up this paper. Take this paper and rewrite it without all the fucking parentheses and do it better. Like, I feel like AI should be on this level at this point. Energy says, for people who complain continental philosophy is detached from real world, they should read this. That's fair. I mean, of course, some analytic philosophy is terrible too. I mean, it's the old rule, 90% of everything is terrible. In fact, from an empirical point of view, humans currently commit soft and small acts of cannibalism without any trouble. Humans eat their own skin from chapped lips, eat dead skin in general, suck their own blood when they're hurt, milk breastfeeding, bite their own nails, swallow sperm from sexual partners, etc. Shute labels these cases as gray zone cannibalism. The eating of human biological products is testified in many ways, even in widely but not universally socially and culturally accepted ways. For instance, eating or drinking bones, blood, and organs for medicinal purposes in China and Europe. Why worry about the moral value of such common practices? Of course, nobody defends that it is morally permissible to kill one of your neighbors for Thanksgiving, but all things being equal, it is also not morally permissible to kill a turkey in your garden for Thanksgiving. Recreative and unnecessary killing and recreative flesh eating are equally morally problematic for moral omnivorism and moral cannibalism. See Routley on the moral wrongness of killing. Frank says, I think this paper is absolutely correct that the argument for eating animals justifies eating humans too, and I also think that the comparison is useful to highlight what was wrong about the argument, but the going on like this is nutso. Yes, like, this is what I always say. It's like, I completely agree. They did a decent job, or I don't know how decent job it was. They did an interesting job. They did some job at the beginning saying, hey, look, once you start making arguments for eating meat, well, then how do you actually define which meat's allowable? And if you can't, like, define the difference between human meat and other meat, then you're also arguing if you can eat those animals, you can eat human animals too. Fine. This is going on for pages and pages. I mean, we're almost done. But, like, the rest of the paper is excessive. Okay, what are the arguments for the moral prohibition of cannibalism or anthropophagy from a non-vegetarian point of view, since of course moral vegetarianism, by forbidding all kinds of meat consumption, naturally implies the inadmissibility of cannibalism, except perhaps in extreme life and death situations. If human chauvinism is removed, see Routley for criticism of human chauvinism, linked it to the question of admissibility of cannibalism, there is not a lot, and surprisingly they are ridiculously bad. They are mistakenly based either on the rationale, and now they're finally transitioning into the why you shouldn't be a meat eater. Latvian says, could a speed run to the most observed reduction save a lot of time? We need a paragraph long published papers. Yeah, this is the issue here. Okay, so now we're finally got to the end, because like this is the end right here, where they're gonna, it's already too long, but these are all the bullet points about, you know, what really should have, like, if you should, why you should be vegetarian. So they're mistakenly based either on the rational, unjustified belief that eating necessarily involves other moral reprehensible activities as harming, hurting, either physically hurting the cannibalized or the psychologically hurting its close relatives and murdering, or on the gratuitous assumption that society which permits cannibalism necessarily creates more unhappiness than happiness, but would it be so if the taboo of human consumption was abolished? Or on the wrong qualification of dead corpses as ends in themselves, so that they possess some so these are all the reasons why cannibalism is okay, and so this is why these are the ridiculous conclusions. Or on the wrong qualification of dead corpses as ends in themselves, so that they possess some unassailable moral dignity, while a living being can be an end in itself, whose living in itself has unconditional worth. So now we're just gonna reference Kant. So Kant, given that living seems to be a precondition that an entity X must fulfill in order to be an end in itself. A dead body fails to meet such a precondition by definition. A dead body is precisely a non-living one. In addition, the fact that we often respect the last requests of the deceased and keep our promises to them, especially their wishes that concern the use of its dead body, cremation, beyond authorization of donation for medical purposes, donation to science, does not imply that its dead body is an end in itself, only implies that it was formerly an end in itself. On this point, the author disagrees with Wisniewski, and Wisniewski, the living has no moral duty to the dead. The belief that it is a moral duty to respect the last request of a deceased is an unjustified and false creed. Liu tries to argue for the thesis that dead bodies possess some low intrinsic moral value from the standpoint of virtue ethics and under the human chauvinist assumption, but he agrees that the moral vulnerability or possible devaluation of dead corpses is not sufficient to prohibit an act of anthropophagy if it is morally justified, yet interspecies justice precisely provides such a moral reason. Here, you fixed it? Okay, yeah. So it's, again, why cannibalism is okay is mistakenly confused on the assumption that respecting a person implies respecting his body forever. So that moral duty, Donaldson and Kamlicka, so that moral duties extend beyond death, but a person is not identical to its body. If this were the case, the atoms that once made up a person in a past far away would still be respected, and we should be daily careful in handling atoms in our everyday activities because they might have formerly belonged to a person who was alive in bygone days. Furthermore, as pointed out by Wisniewski, the relation between the respect due to the deceased person, and the ban of cannibalism is contingent, for very often actual cases of cannibalism were cases of ritual cannibalism, which precisely aims to honor the dead and to express their dignity as formerly living ends in themselves. Hence, ritual cannibalism breaks an intentional entailment from respecting a person to not eating its body. Or on the Victorian idea that eating another human is disgusting, but there are plenty of morally permissible things that are deemed disgusting or reluctant that humans do in their privacy, sometimes with great pleasure. Okay, Unreal has fixed it. The paper, the argui bork that maybe cannibalism is eating the same species meat could be morally obligatory for some meat eaters. Bork. The author goes through moral vegetarianism, no meat eating. Bork under moral omnivorism, meat eating causes biology. Hergi Florian. And this is moral cannibalism, herder. There's two argumentos, a positive one from interspecies justice, the Valsian veil ignorance, bork und. Yeah, I think you missed a line. I don't know what the und is, but okay. Thank you for summarizing, but we gotta get to the end here also. In fact, the only good objection against cannibalism does not argue for its moral wrongness at all. If it were the case, that would be prescriptive fallacy, that is a violation of Hume's law, specifically an illegitimate inference from an ought from an is. Historically, the major problem with cannibalism was a health issue. Unreal continues. What nation we live in can't solve homelessness or conflict in the Middle East, but I can ChatGPT summarize a paper in Swedish chef. Yeah, and that's the problem. We treat the new tech like it's great, and it's really great for certain things and not so great for other things. Like, should it really be treated like the end all? Who knows? Okay, so it's a health issue. It empirically appears that cannibalism is linked to the development of prion disease, especially Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, fatal degenerative brain disorders for humans. Mad cow disease furnishes another example for non-human animals. The most famous and documented case is that of the 4 people from Papua New Guinea who practiced the eating of brains of dead people as a funeral ritual. They are known to have suffered from a local prion disease called kuru, another fatal neurodegenerative disorder transmitted on the occasion of their funerary cannibalism. The epidemic was contained with the prohibition of cannibalism on the kuru epidemic. In the case of kuru, in order to explain the fact that the kuru epidemic takes 20 years to develop and to cause large-scale death, scientists have recently discovered the existence of a prion resistance gene, which prevents all prion diseases and was prevalent during the epidemic amongst the unaffected 4 people. Therefore, although the questions remain whether human cannibalism is inevitably or not tied with prion disease, if moral cannibalism is adopted, it is likely that some evolutionary processes will naturally favor the development of a protection gene against the prion diseases. You see, no. Who are we to stop the prions from replicating? Why are we calling them a disease and us the thing that lives? We have to defend the most vulnerable in our society, which are the prion proteins. They are being killed off. We have to protect them. The idea that we're dying and they're we're killing them at our expense. No. Can't do that. I mean, the idea that we're just gonna let some evolutionary process, we're gonna have to use it in our favor. No, that's not fair. We have to protect them. And see, this is the issue. Like the misunderstanding of other processes that could go into this is part of the issue in this paper. Lafayette says also evolution like that takes millions upon millions of years. Yeah, that's true. Okay, given the current medical, it's a misunderstanding of the world is going on here. Preposterous non-prion propaganda. Yeah, I mean justice for the prions. Seriously. Given the current medical technology, it is also likely that synthesization of such a protective protein will help to avoid the health issues historically linked with some forms of cannibalism. On kuru and the alleged immorality of cannibalism, see also Wisniewski. Of course, moral cannibalism need not to involve either violence or a dystopian society similar to that depicted in Richard Fleischer's sci-fi movie Soylent Green, or that ironically argued for in Swift's modest proposal. For instance, if synthetic meat becomes efficient and ecologically viable, moral cannibalism requires only that the stem cells from which the synthetic flesh grown be extracted from human beings. If meat consumption is a biological need for human, therefore moral cannibalism, morally speaking, and from the standpoint of interspecies justice, the better option. Anyway, the lesson is meat lovers eat ourselves or become vegetarians. Yeah. So, I mean, this is the entire highlight of the entire paper. The lesson is meat lovers eat ourselves or become vegetarians. So, from a pragmatic point of view, it should be noted that the overpopulation of ecologically harmful animal species introduced by humans in alien ecosystems furnish a huge supply of protein nowadays in such a way that it might be thought that human cannibalism can be avoided in practice. For ecological reasons, we are justified to eat the invasive species first. Alas, Homo sapiens is the main widespread invasive species on Earth. And that's the end. No Way Fleischer wrote a thing on cannibalism. They might have written something. Well, it's on Soylent Green. Isn't that Richard Fleischer? Oh, I mean, I don't know who did Soylent Green, but like that is the joke in Soylent Green. Okay, and this is just one more thing. They couldn't stop themselves. They had the good line right here, and then they couldn't stop themselves from writing another fucking paragraph in a parentheses that kills their good line. It's like they could have put this in a footnote. They could have done anything else. And it's like, I think this person has, like, in some sense, they've got a bit of an issue here in how they do stuff. It's like they obviously are skilled, and the overall argument here is like cutesy and clever. It's just their delivery is grating, and that's part of the issue. But like, all right. But chat, let me know what you think. If it gave you some fun ideas and made your brain dance, you give it a brain dance. Spelling and capitalization count. Nog Scream for existential or artistic drama. Nog Ouroboros for deeper ancient ideas. Nog Knife for slicing and dicing arguments. Nog Navel gazing only for academics. Nog Turd, all style, no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch, and my vote meh. Note I calculate an overall score. Anything in the green makes the score go up. Anything in the red makes the score go down. And the vote meh actually makes it go towards the middle. So yeah, Latvian Jesus is dropping a bunch of mess. Unreal Brian gives a nay in parentheses. Energy Diameter, we gave it a 2 nays, a poop, and a grapes. Yeah, so it's like, this is one of these, like this, you know, you get these oddballs in philosophy. Really smart, but like, you know, neurodivergent. Cool. That's fine. Obviously, this person could put together the argument. Their argument made sense. Like, you might not like it, but what they said, like, overall, it's like, okay, if you eat meat, then how do you actually determine which meat it is? And then that means it's not necessarily human meat or not necessarily animal meat. And then once you do that, you might as well limit it to humans because then you're not interfering with other animals. Very cutesy argument. The execution here is just so irritating, to me at least. So, yeah. I mean, Sakno brought up, like, I mean, like, it really only dealt with a very small segment of the population. God forbid you start talking about, you know, differently abled people here. It's nuts. Ross says, I don't like how long it made me think about how I want my body prepared. If I die, I think I'm going to go with BBQ. Yeah, sounds like a good plan, Ra. Latvian says it was fine, just meh is a very accurate word, yeah. Energy says, can I redeem and argue for, or is it too late? You can argue for. I usually don't argue that too long. Of course you can, just tell me what it is. I mean, I only argue for a minute or two for it, so it's no big deal. What do you want me to argue for? Unreal says, beyond vexing about the parentheses format, you can be too analytic regarding ethics. I think the point might start with Pawn Stars, yeah. Leonard Cohen being a better musician than Bob Dylan. Okay. Well, I mean, technically, I'm not good. Like, I'm not big into music, so I could argue on like technicalities. But yeah, Adam gave it a grapes. Frank says get a knife and a mat. Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I'm feeling too. I mean, this was no, we're gonna give it a knife because it did do some arguments to do that, but it's gonna get a bunch of mehs also. Vote meh. Vote meh. So it's like, yeah. Musician, what capacity? Yeah. So, I mean, basically, as far as a better pop artist, you might say that, like, Bob Dylan did a better job being a pop artist, but Leonard Cohen is just sort of revered across, like, all genres and, well, not all genres, but, I mean, the reverence for Leonard Cohen and his music, I feel like it's like, you know, Bob Dylan achieved like cult status and like pop status, but Leonard Cohen is just like more important to people who know what they're talking about. Unfortunately, my musical background is not strong, so it's like if you want me to argue something in ethics, I do better. But the sense I get is like pop stardom is important and good, but again, what is the lasting significance of, changing pop music and the way it goes? Yeah, the singer-songwriter thing, Bob Dylan really did that. But like, again, that's more of a cultural shift than a musical shift. Does Bob Dylan write good lyrics? Yeah, sure. But what does Leonard Cohen do? I think Leonard Cohen brought more kinds of history and let's see, and drew on better sources in terms of music and brought that to the fore. Well, maybe that's what I want to say. Yeah, so let's see what else. Stockton says, but what could they use more in time to talk about differently able people and having run on paragraphs? Particular aspects were already talked about in length, so that's why I believe. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the issue. And of course, yeah, he is Canadian. So, I mean, Leonard Cohen is from Canada, and he gets credit for that. Adam says, because the author peppered in some Rawls and Hume and Soylent Green. Yeah, so it's like, that's kind of how I feel about this. It's a little bit ridiculous. Now, I am on the side with Frank, though. It's like, it's not the worst argument in terms of, like, how can you actually distinguish human animals from other animals? And once you start saying, well, human animals are special, that's a chauvinism, and that gets hard to maintain. And so, like, that's a kind of a decent-ish beginning of a paper, at least.